Hey guys, EST here, and how have I not made this video yet? While in most emergency situations, from small to big, you really wouldn't want to leave your house unless it's a last resort, you have to acknowledge that it might be necessary. Fire, flood, overwhelming numbers, zombies, aliens, I don't know. Avalanche, mudslide, the dam's about to break, I don't know. I mean, you're taking a risk living downstream from a dam, and I'm taking a risk putting the word dam in the first 30 seconds because this is YouTube. They got all these new damn rules about how you can't talk about certain types of dams. So anyway, what do you absolutely need to have, preferably in your garage, maybe in your car? Some of the stuff, it's heavy, it'll cost you gas mileage, and it doesn't like to be jostled around. But what do you absolutely need to keep your car running? Well, the number one is gasoline, so let's just right off the bat say you're probably not going to get more than, 300 miles away-ish, depends on your car. And then, of course, there's electric. The range tends to be even shorter. And there's really, no portable way to charge them except for a solar. And, man, you drive that thing full to empty because of an emergency after charging it overnight? You could have a stack of solar panels and all the wiring and a charge controller and everything and be waiting like a week to fill that thing halfway up. The capacity is just insane, and the average large solar panel is 1 to 200 watts. They're fragile, they're heavy, they're somewhat expensive. So that's just out of the question you're going to get there. Now, gasoline, you can't just make your own gasoline either. So you'd almost be better off with an electric car, but I'm not saying buy one just for emergencies. And all the common ones out right now have, severe Gen 1 defects or just ongoing who cares defects because of careless designs that they don't seem too keen on fixing. But let's say there's some kind of event, I can't imagine what this would be, but where people really, really rapidly died and you survived. So make sure they're not there and they don't need it. You know what I mean? Like, there's no sense being a thief or risking your own safety or, breaking into someone's house when they might need to be the next one to leave. No. And then after that, you just need a siphon kit. Now, a lot of cars have siphoning blocking filters. And then they're also, they block like people from dumping stupid stuff into the gas tank. Not all of them have it, but some of them you can break through. They're all built differently. Now, obviously, I've never done it. So not every car is siphonable. I don't have percentages, but I even heard most of them aren't. So that whole just siphon gas thing, if they're accurate in the movies, they tend to just do it with diesel because those are just big tanks, dual tanks, stuff like that on big trucks. Or they just don't bother with siphon filters. They just lock it or who knows. I actually kind of doubt that my car has a siphon filter because it has an internal release for the gas cover. So it opens the door, but you got to already be in the car to do it. So why would they also put a siphon filter on it? Or siphon blocker. Siphon filter is a video game. But a siphon kit, you could throw that in the trunk, with a nice long hose, this little squeezy ball thing. Make sure it, isn't a real cheapy garbage one. Because those tend to underheat and UV, so in other words, in your car, break down, and it needs to be a flawless airtight seal and liquid-proof seal. You do not want to spill fuel. So having one of those in general, and then having one in your car, very, very good. Now, the other thing is a spare tire. Every car I've ever owned, I take it out because, I wanted some extra performance, but I did it in the total name of gas mileage, not just acceleration and speed and handling. And the cost of one tow, I have probably made up in the amount of gas I've saved over, this many years of driving with. It's got to be 40, 50 less pounds. Now, unless you got, a truck or a Jeep or something, it's probably an undersized piece of garbage, and it's probably not inflated correctly. So if you're going to have a spare tire, which if you take it out, at least know where it is. If I got an extra 60 seconds, I'm going into my garage, grabbing some stuff, grabbing the spare tire, throwing it in the back. Also have a pump, preferably a manual pump. But, if you're going to do a 12-volt cigarette lighter one, yeah, you're already in your car. Just know they tend to break a little bit more, and the cheapy Harbor Freight ones are pretty bad. And then you get the dual purpose of, then you could inflate your own tire in case it became low. Now, if it's a slow leak, okay, cool, pull over every whatever and do it. But it's not exactly going to fix, a nail in it, where it's flat. But we just put my brother's on because he had, a giant gash in the side. It looked like barbed wire or something that he ran over. We just had to get it there instead of a flatbed tow. Come on. So we put it on and we had to inflate it to, I believe, 55 or 60 PSI. That is what they tend to be. Whereas normally, a Cooper sedan would be, 30 to 33 PSI usually. Now, the number listed on the side of your tires right now, your production everyday use tires, are probably it says 60, 70, 80 PSI or something utterly ridiculous on it. That's the max pressure before it explodes. I don't know why they even bother. And the PSI is different for every vehicle. So what else are they going to mark on it? Now, my spare tire said on it what the PSI actually should be. And then they were also nice enough to write what the max speed is. I'll give you a hint. If it's not a matching tire and it's at ultra high PSI, it's not highway speed. Read the manual. Usually it's 50. And I'll tell you what, right now, download the manual if you can get it. Usually it'll be a couple megabytes, maybe 100 if it had like diagrams. You could throw that on a 1 gig, let alone an 8 gig micro SD, and then have that ready to pop into your phone. If it'll take that, throw that in the glove box. It weighs nothing and takes up no space. And those used on eBay, it's basically the cost of shipping. You might be able to find them at the pawn shop just for like whatever. You get a 32 for like $3. And in there, no matter what, it should say what the pressures for the regular tires are, ideally, in case it's not on your door wells or not listed anywhere in your car for some reason. And then also say what the spare should be. So have the spare and a way to fill it up. And if you have to drive off-road, maybe you're going to overstress something. Maybe, just some extreme braking or who knows? I mean, who knows? You shouldn't be like running from something. But in case you had to dodge cars because of a big backup or go on a road you're not familiar with or go just a little bit, through some mud or who knows. Could be a weather event that you're getting away from. Could be extreme heat. Yeah, your car and your tires might have a higher failure rate in general. So it's just nice to have the manual and it's also nice to have the spare. Also, obviously, a jack and the tire iron. And a really heavy, fairly long sledgehammer or rubber mallet if you want to save weight is also really nice. Or a pipe extender, like a big, just a sturdy but light pipe that you can put on the end of the tire iron to really crank your lug nuts off on the tire to get it off. Because some of those things like to just about weld themselves on if your car is kind of old. Especially driving up north here with the salt and stuff. Oh my gosh. I even got all the lug nuts off and I had to drop the car from the jack onto the tire to try and get it off. It still wouldn't come off. So I had to finger tighten the nuts back on and then drive like an S-curve up and down my driveway until I heard it jump threads. Well, you can't do that if it's not running or if it's flat. You really shouldn't roll on a rim like that. If you had to, whatever, and then you're just going to drive with the spare until you run out of gas, like, okay, because you don't have the tools to repair like a severe flat, like the point where you're changing it. But if all this sounds like a whole thing, you don't really know where to jack it up, it is all in the manual, like I said. But if you're not comfortable doing that, I mean, just watch a how-to on YouTube for 5 minutes. It's incredibly simple, and scissors jacks are slow but really easy. And the place in the frame where you jack up your car is actually like really easy to find. So don't be too intimidated, but also don't go do it right now just for the fun of it. You really shouldn't take your tires off unless you have a darn good reason. And then when you put them back on, just FYI, after driving 50 miles, they say, although distance versus highway versus city versus bunch of turns left, right, and braking and acceleration, so it's not really 50, it's just after a little bit, you have to retorque them. And you will be surprised how loose they are if you don't do that. The metals all settle in, and if you hear clunking, you're probably jumping threads, which means they're not tight enough. So do that if you don't want like massive damage or to break one of the studs or something. That would be bad. So tires are difficult and complicated. Everything from here on out is actually pretty easy. So I did mention earlier, have the manual on some kind of digital form. I mean, if you have to print it, I guess. I got a cheap laser printer, probably $2 to print that thing, even if it's like 100 pages. But I just have the original manual that came with the car. And of course, it's in my glove compartment, even though I could almost anywhere look it up. If I'm stranded somewhere where I can't get a tow, I'm going to want to, diagnose it and look at some specs myself, So the big one is if you blew a fuse, which doesn't tend to happen, but I mean, if you got a little bit of damage because you went off road or some little, you're driving differently just because whatever, you never know. You could have something overheat, something overdraw, something short. Have a couple spare extra fuses. They are pretty pricey. I think you can get them online cheaper than the absolute gouging you get at an auto shop. But a lot of the super cheap ones are like a little off. They don't really blow at the amount that they're supposed to, which could cause a fire. But still, I mean, in an emergency, if it just blew, you better find out why, because you're just going to blow the next one. So that's one thing to remember. You can't just keep sticking fuses in and pretend like that's the solution. I've seen people take any kind of metal, paperclip, earrings, whatever, bend a gold ring, bend your key ring into a U shape and just jam it in there and say, okay, well, whatever blew the fuse is overdrawing it, which means that circuit, some wire or some device is about to light on fire, in theory. So find out why it grounded out, find out why it overdrew, find out what's wrong with it. And if you don't need it, don't replace the fuse. So I'm kind of on the fence about even having spare fuses, but the one thing I am going to mention is your car might have certain features that you don't want it to have. You want to override them, and you can do that by just pulling a fuse. Some safety stuff where you're just like, no, I need to drive off-road. Yeah, I need to take a couple extra G's. I need to turn off this system, that system. I need to turn off, this alarm. But the big one is, and this is harder to disable, it's car by car, and also it's not generally a good idea, just FYI. So this is just in case of emergency or in case your personal preference and you can do it safely. A lot of modern cars have some kind of crash disabling feature. So that if there's anything they detect as like an impact, and we could be talking, jump a curb. We could be talking a minor impact where it's just, body damage, no bent frame, you didn't take out the radiator, your belt's still spinning. But it was like a bumper bump, and now your car will not move. It's in like some kind of emergency limp mode, which will let you go a certain speed or like not shift out of first or something. Or it's in just I am refusing to move mode, and you got to know how to undo that like quickly, especially if like you hit a deer or an animal or somebody shot at the side of your car. The last thing you want is it stopping. That's insane. So either disable that in the first place and just hope you don't get knocked out in an accident while also your foot's pinned on the gas pedal. I guess that's their theory. I don't know. I thought these are just stupid safety features that aren't. Plain and simple, they just are not. I don't know why they do this. But I've seen a lot of times where it's like a failed carjacking. They take out the motorcycle-based robbers, big thing in Brazil. They'll just ram them and be like, I'm going to drive off. I'm not going to open my door. Probably a fake gun anyway, bit of a bluff, but some people have just had enough and they're just like, whatever. So they run over the bike, and then their system detects, your fancy luxury car just was in some kind of minor incident. Oh, some little tiny body damage, a little G-force. I better refuse to move. That is the last thing you ever want to happen. Just on a daily basis, if my car had that, I would absolutely turn it off. I would find a way to disable it if at all possible. Some of it's hardwired, it's in the ECU, and some of it you can select it just by doing this weird sequence. Some of it you got to get it reprogrammed at the dealership, and some of it you just pull a relay, change a relay, or pull a fuse. If you can't do any of those things and it's just absolutely not going to turn off, know how you can override it, because there's always a way to override it. Just know how to do it. And if you think you're going to forget because, panic and stress and, oh no, I just hit a bear and he's getting back up and, I don't know, zombies, rabies, people trying to steal your car. When you got to go, you got to go. And if you just hit one of them but you're justified in leaving because you want to get away from the threat and need to, you're going to want to know, do you... I think one example I heard was turn the key to accessory and then off, then accessory off, then start it. That'll override it. But like I said, it is different for every car model and even like within the same brand. Some consistency, but not necessarily. So look up like your car's safety features and how to override it. And then print it out, put it in the glove box if you're just going to completely blank on it and just start trying stuff or you're panicking or whatever. And you can at least then take a couple seconds to pull that out and then read it, and it's extra time, but better than not moving for the next 10 minutes. And if you're going to pull a fuse and you put it back wrong and blow it, you might want to have spare fuses, to go back to why I was mentioning that. Also, a lot of cars have two fuse boxes, one on the inside, one on the outside. Just be aware of that. Take off a panel or whatever, look where it is, look up instructions, just familiarize yourself with everything in your car, which you should just do no matter what, let alone emergency situations. So what else does a car need to keep moving? I thought about it and I'm like, well, you need a functioning this, functioning that. Well, you technically don't need this, but it's all stuff where like, it would take me 8 hours to swap it out because I'm not a very good mechanic. Yeah, you need an alternator. Should you just keep one of those laying around? No, if the alternator doesn't work, you gotta do something different then. It would be weird if it randomly broke. They tend to not do that. So I thought, like, what's cheap, what's replaceable, what could you have, and what do you want to have? And I thought, okay, I came up with a couple things, and if you guys have something additional to this that I missed, because I feel like there is something I'm missing, leave it down in the comments. Number 1, windshield wipers. Look, you're gonna replace them anyway, just have the next ones, and then when you use those, buy another one. Just get one ahead, it's that simple. With most cars, they don't have to actually match. You could be off by a couple inches just to at least, run at all. Now, I wouldn't do that out of spec. They're the size they are for a very good reason. And if they're too big, you might blow out the motor and you might start clipping stuff and all that. But if they're too small, like, okay, your field of vision went down by an inch. So I wouldn't say buy the wrong ones on purpose, but like if you saw something on a clearance sale, which I always do, like off season or stores closing, and it's a really uncommon size, I'll pick it up. I have one. And the other thing is, it's almost a sure thing, at least with American cars and imports and really most cars, that the one on the driver's side is a different size than the one on the passenger side. The one on the back, yeah, it'd be nice to see out the back, but you really just need to see where you're going. So imagine if your wiper got damaged by whatever, some weather thing, and it doesn't work. If you can't see, you can't drive. You could attempt to kick out the front window, Not as easy as in the movies. It's sealed in there pretty good, and the front is laminated. So you're going to get glass powder everywhere, and every time you move or turn on the vents, you're going to get glass powder in the air. You do not want to breathe that, and you don't want to be sitting on a seat with it. Like, it's a whole process. Why don't you just have some replacement wipers? They're a couple dollars for the cheapest of the cheap, just beater wipers, and we all got beater wipers here where I live because winter. It's like, it's winter, you either got a whole beater car or you just put on your beater parts. Some people put on their beater tires. You ain't going out there in fancy rims, okay, with the salt. No. So a similar one is windshield wiper fluid. I was going to say coolant too, but I'm like, well, you could just pour water in there. It'll work for a while. The windshield wiper fluid, I'm not sure how effective water would be because it doesn't have any kind of alcohol like evaporation or like soap detergent effect. I'm not actually sure what's in windshield wiper fluid. I think it's a mild alcohol mix, but I feel like that would strip off the paint. So I'm actually really not sure at all. But you should have a bottle of it. I mean, here in winter, they bring in the pallets of them to every gas station. But, I mean, you're going to run out at some point. If you're waiting for, like, the refill on the the oil change, okay, then I guess a lot of people never had to buy it. But if you have that and just a basic cheap funnel, you can still get them for, I mean, in a pack under $1 each. And then usually, like, a whole gallon of fluid's like $4 or $5. If you run out of that and it's bad weather, people are kicking up stuff, you get mud, or you're driving off road, or you're just where I live, people kicking up like salt water from the salt from melting and all that. If you can't see out the front window and you can't clear it with the windshield wipers, well, then you're gonna need some windshield wiper fluid. So that's dirt cheap. Always have it around. Just know that like a bottle of that stuff. I had one almost burst in my car. It was leaking a little bit after kind of jostling around. I thought I had it secured pretty well. So either strap it down or just don't keep it in your car. And that is not good grade plastic that's like UV and heat resistant. It's pretty garbage plastic. So a year or two in your car, that thing's going to probably start leaking and cracking, and that is nasty. That's a horrible thing to clean up, and some water damage can cause really bad effects. So I'd keep it in the house or the garage. Probably right next to the windshield wipers. In fact, you could just have a car emergency go bag, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be in the car, depending upon space and sensitivity to temperature extremes and like physical impact rolling around and that kind of stuff. Maybe don't keep like a big giant duffel bag of everything you need, including wipers and all that, but I would have one. Just a grab and go emergency car bag. Why not? And then you can throw all kinds of stuff in there. You could just get like a random shop towel, some microfiber, a spray bottle, not like a compressed metal, sprayer of window cleaner. That would be just nice. Put some lock de-icer in there. Put, some pure alcohol in case you got to make your own antifreeze mix, kind of. That's going to do a lot of damage. Like, know what you're doing with that stuff if you have to use it. But you can get a chipless, door open only key, a little button cell battery for the key fob. Really like think and just, get some nice stuff, put it in there. You can put an air freshener in there for all I care. I mean, if you're driving somewhere in your car, I mean, you could put a bottle of water or an empty canteen in there, little emergency pack of rice and be all good to go. But now we're talking just like a go bag that you would throw in your car, which I covered in a recent video. Like, what should you have instead of just the bug out bag, carryable backpack, on foot, keep it light? What should you have in like the bigger duffel bag or like, bigger knapsack type of thing? That it would be nice, but isn't appropriate for like a lightweight on foot emergency backpack. So if you already have that, I mean, just keep it car specific, not like car trip, car escape specific. But if you don't have it, make it both. That's kind of where I'm going with that. So the next thing is fix a flat. Slow leak, a nail that's in there and it's rolling and you're losing some stuff, or a little tiny puncture. Can you fix it permanently-ish with Fix a Flat? What are the limitations and how does it work? Yes, Fix a Flat is a brand name. No, I'm not sponsored. It's a spray container, which those like to breach. Do not store them in your car. Your garage at best, and even then, temperature extremes, watch out. It has liquid tire sealant and some air to compress it. And then you kind of put it in the stem, which also the stem can leak if it's damaged. Actually, the valve can leak if it's damaged too. Well, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but after spraying it in there and it seals it up, you have 3 days or 100 miles to get your tire actually professionally repaired. So it's just supposed to save money on a flat, but it's also not the safest thing to store in a car. So it's like not my favorite product, let's put it that way. But if you had some sitting around and you got an emergency bag, you throw it in there, you could seal up some pretty nasty stuff. Not like a full-blown, blowout or especially anything in the walls. I think it can't do anything to the tire wall. It can only do it around the tread and the outside. And also, you got to identify the tire puncture and what caused it. And I believe if it's like a nail or something not too crazy, you got to pull it out. And then move it so that it's on the bottom because that's where it's going to settle. So you have to roll your car a little bit and, or jack it up, rotate it. This isn't just magic flat fix, I can drive on it now forever. So you shake the can up quite a bit because it likes to settle. Spray it down the valve, spray it for about 45 seconds. Empty the entire can, and then immediately drive your car after inflating it a little bit, 2 to 4 miles to help the sealant spread around. Now, why should you do that? It'll spin off axis. It'll have a whole bunch of weight and sealant on one, and then it'll just wub, 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 wub on the highway. That kind of vibration is very bad for your car. So this will get you, like it says, 3 days or 100 miles, and then you got to swap your tire out. So I just don't like Fix-A-Flat. It's neat, but I don't like it. It's not effective enough. Who knows what it's going to do to the rims? I've heard mechanics say it's great and others say it's terrible. And they had to put tire sensor safe on some of them because, some imitators and some earlier versions potentially would mess with the pressure sensors. Well, my car doesn't have none of that. It's not very new. But yeah, I'm not a fan, but still, like, if it gets you moving and it's a lot faster and easier, though not quite as easy as people think, to get you rolling for a little bit, sure, it's not terrifically expensive. So the other thing is a battery that would fit your car. Now, I'm not even saying the exact battery. If it's an emergency, look, I got a little solar panel. I mean, you guys have seen it on the channel if you've been watching long enough. It goes up to my roof. It's, several watts. Not big enough. I should have put a 50 on there. That goes to a little $20 charge controller. Not even. Some basic cheap wiring too. And then that goes to just a basic lead-acid marine-style battery. Now, that battery, if it fits in the actual battery cage, would, of course, start my car. Why wouldn't it? If it has the same or higher cold cranking amps or anything just reasonably enough to, turn over your car, it will turn over your car. Now, keeping an extra lead-acid battery when they tend to weigh 40 to, 80 pounds, depending upon the style, keeping that in your car is just stupid. That is complete. It's not safe. It has to be strapped in. It could short. It could puncture. Don't do that. Having one just sitting around the house, you have to put it on a float charger or a solar panel just to keep it leveled because it will slowly lose power over time, and that's even higher depending upon the surface you put it on, which a lot of people don't know about. They think it's fully insulated. It is, but there's an effect on, I want to say, concrete. So shall we store it on wood blocks? But put a little, half an amp float charger on it just to make sure that always it's topped off to 14.1 or whatever, 12 something, I don't remember. I think 14.1 is operational with the alternator going, and 12.4, I want to say, is the spec for most of them. Yes, if you're sitting there at 11, it ain't going to turn over your car very easily or at all. Now, you can get those jumper packs because those are cool. They're usually lithium-based, and they can jump your car a couple times, but they're very limited in what they can do. It's kind of the inverse of a battery bank that you would charge your phone with. Ironically, a lot of them you can charge your phone on it with a USB port. But if you make sure those are topped off, because those will leak energy over time as well, you can grab that out of your garage. You could store it in your car, but lithium batteries don't like temperature swings. And your car in the sun and then your car in the winter, depending upon where you live, that is a big swing. So those are cool, but if your battery's damaged, every time you slow down or have to stop, the thing could stall and you'll have to jump it again. I mean, you're talking about electrical short in the battery. Technically, if you drive on a bad battery that's known to be shorted out, damaged, frozen, from an extreme cold, usually if it already had some water in the cells or was failing already or the voltage dropped because you left it on, then it'll freeze internally if it's a really cheapy garbage battery. Well, it could start, cracking the walls and stuff and off-gassing hydrogen and all this nasty stuff, and then it'll sit there and absorb electricity. That'll overstress your alternator. Just becomes this whole thing where you got to always hold it at 2,000 RPM or higher no matter what. You just have to remember to do that or you got to jump it again. So just remember that. I'd rather just replace it with a whole new battery. Now, if you can get anybody's car open one way or another, if they're really not going to need it, cannot stress that enough, you can hit the hood release, open it up, find out if it's not massively bigger than yours. Usually bigger van, bigger truck, it won't fit in your smaller car if you have one. Other than that, you could go the other way. You could take a smaller battery and start a bigger truck, usually. I mean, I wouldn't take an F350 and try and start it with a battery from a Geo Metro or something, but it could work. If that was the only option, I'd at least try it. But you also need tools to get the battery terminals off. You can just kind of pound them on with something vaguely heavy like a rock usually. But getting them off is a thing. So, just have a basic multi-tool with a little thing to turn, the nuts. And then you're all set. Now, the funny thing is you could take like 18650 cells or just like a basic little, you know, medical grade lithium iron phosphate, which are really expensive, but just whatever. You can get some APC, like UPS batteries, those cells, old medical stuff. As long as it's a sufficient number of amps, which is the hard part. But 18650s have an immense electricity output. If you get it up to 12 volts, it'll start your car. I know somebody who threw like a capacitor just for leveling and then like a little tiny couple of cells. And they said, well, you know, this adds up to about 10 to 20 amp hours. As long as I don't leave my lights on, it'll start the car. And they took out their lead acid and just left that in there. Well, I know what I think about putting lithium cells in like a 180 degree engine compartment. It's certainly an interesting idea, but for, you know, the cost of just cracking open a laptop battery, be careful, it's very sharp and dangerous, it can light on fire. You could take out some 18650 recycled cells, build like a little, you know, put them in series, get 12 volts, and ta-da. You know, electrical tape them together, and now you could start a car with it. So an improvised battery will do it as long as they'll burn out quick. It'll probably, you know, start the car once, but if you had, you know, a backpack full of a row of them like I do to run my other gear, I could start a car with them. They need a bit of wire too, obviously, but I've seen people get real creative. I might make a video on this at some point. I just don't want to blow my car up. It's not the safest thing to do, but it'd be an interesting video. So just remember, all you really got to do is get a very high amount of amps and a little over 12 volts supplied to the lines that would normally hook up to your battery, and your car will start, because DC electricity is DC electricity. It's not picky. So battery, visibility, and your tires rolling. I can't really think of much other than that. I guess I could say air filter. I mean, usually if I pull my air filter, it's usually a high-end, you know, high-flow cotton one, because of course it is. It's just dirty-ish. It's not a disaster. I would have already swapped it, you know. So you can keep that in the car. It doesn't weigh much, you know, a couple ounces. Keep the old one, even if it's one of those crappy paper ones, if it's not a complete and utter catastrophe. And if it is, just get a paper one off the shelf. They're usually under like, you know, 10, 15 bucks. And just have that in case, I guess, your cotton one, or even some paper ones if they wet lock. Like we're talking, you had to drive through real thick water, it's sprayed up, your undercarriage isn't as sealed as it used to be, aka skid plate, whatever keeps water from splashing up on the engine. If you get water in your intake, it could take a day to dry out like a cotton air filter. A paper one, I mean, you wave it around and I don't know, if it's raining, you ain't moving for a while. So like you could run without one at all, but a lot of modern cars, well, all modern cars will throw a high airflow detected error code. Some of them will turn off the engine because sucking up unfiltered air is incredibly detrimental and very dangerous to the car's engine. So they have something called a mass airflow sensor. And if they're like, oh, wow, like somebody just punched a hole through that air filter, it's clearly sucking up so much that there can't possibly be a filter there. I better throw a warning, and I really should not do this. That's what your engine is thinking. Just kidding. That's what the engineers who designed your engine are thinking. So it may or may not run just without it. I wouldn't try it. If it was an emergency, I would try it. But you'd have to know, oh, wow, I just went through water, and it's totally not the battery. We'll get to diagnosing that in a second, but it's definitely my soaking wet air filter inside the air intake. Yeah, I would just run without it, or like I said, have in your emergency bag the old air filter. It will at least work. Air, electricity, fuel, and tires, and visibility. Okay, but let's go back to fuel. I mentioned this in a ton of other videos, so I'm putting this at the end here in the little bonus section. Whenever my car hits half, I fill it up. Because then, no matter what happens, I can always go about 150 to 200 miles. I don't really need to explain that, just do that. Half is empty. Now, if you're going to use fuel injector cleaner, you want to drive it all the way down, and, you know, there's some other things, like if you drive real far for work or whatever, you just don't want to fill up every day. But if you can, keep half fuel in it. Now, I've made my thoughts very clear on storing gasoline safely in your garage or your house or your car, in that you can't. But if I was going somewhere, no matter if it was mostly full, as long as I didn't literally just come from the gas station and top it off, I'm either grabbing and pouring in the stuff from my snowblower or my lawnmower, depending upon what season it is. It's actually the same gas tank. I got a little 2-gallon full of ethanol-free 91. That stuff will last quite a while in the can. And yes, you can mix 87 with 89 or 91 in almost any engine. You can't, however, run E15. And if your car can switch to it and run on it, it has to do it entirely. You have to run it down to almost empty. They do not mix. Another thing is, for about $8, you can get a basic Bluetooth ODB2 reader, they're called. You put it in the little slot going to your ECU under the dash. That's usually where it is. And then you can hook up to it with like a free program. I think this is still free. I did get the paid version, obviously, a couple bucks. But Torque. It's just called Torque. Download that on your phone, and you can connect to it over Bluetooth. Make sure you set up the car's profile at a time, because you got to do that. And you can look at, read, diagnose, and clear engine codes. You can also read all kinds of real-time information, like temperatures and voltages and that kind of stuff. That's just nice to have, a couple bucks. And then the other thing, speaking of that, is a multimeter, or just specifically a DC voltmeter, so that you can check the status of your battery so that you can rule that out or know it's the cause and save yourself some time if your car isn't starting. Now, some mechanics will say, well, starter fluid, obviously, or starting spray or whatever. It's like, I don't know, probably a 200 octane spray that you could spray directly into like the fuel intake to get a car to turn over if it's got like really rough, old or damaged, I don't know, like an old carburetor or like really bad fuel injectors. I don't really know why or when you use it other than, oh, this thing's been sitting for 10 years not started. But something that insanely explosively flammable is not getting stored in my car, sorry. And also, I don't have a carburetor, so I actually wouldn't really know where to spray that. Hate to admit it, but like I said, I'm no mechanic. I know the basics, I can keep my car running, I can change my own brakes, but hey. And speaking of that, like, why would you have brake pads? People are like, oh, I always have spare brake pads. Oh, just in case you need to swap your brakes. Like, I guess you could burn them out, but like rotors and stuff, a set of 4 rotors, or 2 if it's drums in the back, that's gotta be approaching 50 to 100 pounds. Those things are insane. And then they oxidize. You need special equipment to put them on, kind of. Then you need lubricant. Like, why would you have an entire brake job in your car? Like, in your garage, sure, why not if you found them on sale, but I don't know, man. That's more like I need to keep my car running and there's an economic collapse for the last 3 years, or supply chain disruption, not, oh, I need to real quick swap out my brakes because I burned them out. Like, leave the car at that point. If you can pull it over and do them overnight, or just run on totally torched rotors, who cares? Man, I've heard some stuff about people's emergency car repair kit, and they basically got the tools and the stuff in that bag that'll rebuild the car twice over, but that ain't within my skill set, and that's not within my acceptable amount of weight or budget. So you don't got to get too crazy with it. It's just the basics that I said pretty much. So one more just kind of nice thing to have if we're talking about, just stuff to throw in your car in general, or just another thing to put in your emergency bag, is a glass breaker. Spring-loaded preferably, but, those hammer ones are pretty good too, because, it's just manual force. You'd still be surprised at how hard you have to swing it to break a modern window. They're meant to not do that. But you'd also be surprised at how hard you're going to swing it if you just put it off a bridge into some water. Oh, that adrenaline's gonna be going. But the spring-loaded ones, I mean, you could have a toddler use that. Watch out, your toddler will use it too. They're like little walking saboteurs. So besides that, you can't really store this in your car, so do have a go bag, a couple days worth of really important medication, or just nice medication. Like for me, my allergies are so severe. That'd be nice to just have on your mind, but you can't store it in the car because of the temperature swings. You just cannot store almost any medication at all in, negative below 0 temperatures of winter, and then like upwards of 120 to 160 inside your car while sitting in a parking lot in July. That stuff will go bad so quick. We're talking weeks, maybe even a day. Some of that stuff, it's real complex molecules. They'll get damaged, turn into poison. You do not want to mess with that. So don't just have it in your car, but if you're about to leave in your car, bring it with you. But like I said, that should already be in your go bag if it's that important. Besides that, I mean, gloves to work on something hot, and the waterproof gloves to work on something that involves water, and just a general funnel for doing fluids and stuff. Just trying to think what's even in my bag. I mean, that's pretty much it. Not much. But if you guys have any other ideas, let me know down in the comment section. Otherwise, this is everything you should need within practical ability to predict to keep your car rolling in an emergency scenario. So thanks for watching. If you like the informative nature and the kind of long form content, we do that, but also some short form instructional and testing and online rumor testing, and a little bit of occasional equipment reviews, all unsponsored on this channel. So if you're looking for that and more, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.